On today's podcast, we're going to talk some RPO, and joining us are two coaches from Alcorn State, the offensive coordinator, offensive line coach Elliott Wratten, and wide receivers coach Jason Phillips. Guys, great to have you here on the podcast.
Coach, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So we'll dig right into it here. Coach Wratten, you've been there 5 years. Coach Phillips, you're now in your third year. So you guys have put together a system here with RPO that has your own twist on things, that you do things a little bit differently. Just from an overview, how do you see that your system is a little bit unique?
Yeah, I think we don't necessarily concentrate on, hey, let's come up with the newest route to beat this particular look. We found ourselves, I think, really at 18, we were throwing RPOs, and we would get the pull read, the throw read, and our kid would turn and throw it, and we're throwing slants or a glance and into the worst leverage and the worst look possible, and kids are just getting beat up and things like that. And so we came back and we really said, instead of concentrating on let's have the best route, let's have the best route called at the right time. And, we kind of had to rethink how we did some things and put some faith in our kids to make us right on some situations. So we last spring, I guess spring of 19, we started with letting the receivers call the routes, and package that in a way where it made it feasible for the quarterback and didn't put too much on him, and a lot of trial and error, and it worked out well for us.
I love that idea of being able to put it out there on the kids. I think we do so many things now where you see teams looking up to the press box, looking to the sideline, and getting the call from the press box, and the answer's there. Now you've seen it, at first when a lot of people started doing that, there wasn't a lot of change on the defense, right? You dialed them in and you changed what you were doing based on it. But when you look to the sideline now, they're looking at the sideline and they're changing. So when you come back to it, you get their eyes back to it. When everything gets set again, it might be different than what you were doing. So I think this is just a great answer to combat some of those things.
Yeah, I think, and I'll let, Coach Wratten speak to you in terms of run game, but we do most of these in our RPO, 11 personnel, with a tight end off in the sniff position. And what we talk in terms of with the quarterback is we're going to handle those 6 guys. You've got to identify and handle the 7th on both sides. Now, that's his extent from what he's supposed to handle. And we feel like if he can handle those 7s, that Coach Wratten's guys can handle the 6. And even, I think it's set up to where he doesn't just have to kill 6 guys. We can technically let the defense play out and cancel gaps how they want. As long as we're controlling the 7th fitter, the ball spills there. We feel like we can get 5-6 yards of carry. And that's actually our rule for when to pull and to throw it. If that guy's not in a position to tackle the ball carrier for anything less than 5, hand the ball off. Don't make it gray, and he's got to make big movement for us to pull and throw.
I know from a philosophical standpoint, I've heard a lot of different ways that people think about RPO. Some guys got into it and have said, well, it's our passing game too, where, a lot of guys I talk to, and it's especially, I think the ones where the offensive line coach is is also the coordinator, that, you think of it as, this is just going to help us run the football. We're really thinking, as much as we can, we want to run the football, and this is something just to protect our runs.
Yeah, and the one thing, and that's that is part of it, because when I'm sitting here thinking about it, I think the RPOs allow us to be able to run into more of a true box when we can get our 6-man boxes and that part of it. But, for us, it's week to week, it's just how can we get the best plays up? We've all been around guys that want to hand that thing off as many times as they can. And, the running back's job is to make the safety miss. But I think this allows us to throw the ball when we really would need to throw the ball when the numbers say that, and to hand it off when it allows us. And, from a coordinator perspective, we used to look at our call sheet and you'd have all these RPOs on here because they would change up that look outside. And last year was my first year calling it, and you looked at it and, we had 4 or 5 different, routes that we'd want to throw. And you're sitting there like, how do I get all these called? You look at your call sheet, it expands, and now we're able to limit that down to, okay, we have inside zone, and then we have the pass concept out there, and they're going to make it right. Not make it right, but we're going to have the best call available, and I thought that part was really helpful for me in not getting overwhelmed. And, like you said, when they look over and check, I'm looking at the box. Coach Phillips is upstairs. We don't have to, for that part of our package, I don't have to say, what are you seeing out there? It's built into what we're doing.
Yeah, I love that part of it, because as an offensive coordinator, and I went through this exercise probably several times during my career, as sometimes you look at the menu of things that start making it, the way into your offense, and, maybe expands beyond the point where your thought process can be clear. Because when you look at it, and let's go before the days of RPO, you were calling a run or a pass. It was, here's a limited set of things. And now when you take, well, it could be this, and here's our variations of the run, and here's all our variations of the routes we could put into it. And, well, what if they do this? We'll put this in. That list becomes very big and not manageable from a reps in practice standpoint, but also from just being able to think as a coach on where do I go next? Because we're making our decisions, not probably in about 10 seconds. We don't have the whole play clock. We have the whole mechanics of getting the play in and players getting set. So we've got to make a decision very quickly. And when there's just more things in our head, we get cluttered. It becomes more difficult for us. So I love the way that you guys have approached this and set it up, because ultimately, you can start to, and we'll get into maybe practice later, but just an overview now, you can start to compartmentalize those things. So remove those receivers and you go work your run. They can do their things and understand just the different looks that they might see and what they have to do based on that.
Yeah, for sure. I, speaking to that end of it, like, this is probably the very first thing we install. Because we're going to run split zone, we're going to run zone insert, and we're going to throw RPOs. Now, we don't have to do any of that together. We're completely separated from that. And the biggest thing that we have to work on is making sure that, like for my guys, making sure we're getting all the looks. And that's the biggest thing we do is, instead of spending time on 30 or 40 different routes or whatever we've got going on, we're going on the top 3 or 4 looks that we're going to see to this particular surface in a given week. And there's only maybe 3 things we're going to call against it, but we're always going to call it in the right circumstances, and part of our deal was, and it kind of goes back to, you want to call these to throw it, call it to run it. We have a lot of packages that we do with these, and the mindset for the quarterback changes through each package. Okay, so when we call these where the receivers are calling the routes, we're telling them in that package, all right, now be a little bit more aggressive. If you see the throw, take the throw. Whereas if we have a package with our access package, you just got to totally have it. You know what I'm saying? It's almost a pre-snap gimme. This is not that. This kind of tells them, hey, be aggressive right here. Take your shots. And as part of that, we want to hand the ball off and run it. And we said anything for 5 or less, throw it. If he can tackle you for 5 or less, throw it. But at the same time, we want to make you – we want you to – if you're going to try to add that 7th guy or that extra hat to the fit, we want to take advantage of it in a big way. So when we throw it, our expectations are it's going to be a first down. So we're not throwing stop routes. We want to throw routes that are all on the move. We want to catch it and on the move. And the expectation is if you're going to try to take away our 5, we want to get 10. We're not calling them to replace a 4-yard gain with a 5-yard catch tackle hitch.
Right.
That doesn't really – the trade-off for that is not really worth it. So that's kind of the move we made along with it as well was, we want to catch the ball on the move and get explosives and move chains when we do throw. So I don't know if that kind of.
Yep. So I think what we can do here is talk a little bit first about the run game and the approach to, thinking about it, training it, getting your reps in practice. We'll talk a little bit about what your guys are doing, the receivers are doing out on the edges and how they get to certain things, and then maybe put that all together here. So flipping over to the run game here, Coach, you've mentioned it's split zone, it's same side zone, it's insert zone. So for the guys up front, I imagine there's very few differences. So first and foremost, there's an efficiency in the teaching that there's a lot of same as within those 3 variations.
Yeah, for sure. And, where we're going to start and just looking back on it is more zone insert, just because from what we saw, that guy, whoever he's spilling it to, it puts a little bit more stress on it than split zone. But, as far our guys have no idea when it's an RPO up front. They're just blocking it. Whether it's split zone or zone insert, that, like I said, they're blocking the run. So there is no even thought in their mind that it's an RPO. The center for what we do, he gets the majority of the responsibility. We're going to ID someone every time. And that ties in for the quarterback's teaching. If whoever we ID on the front side, he knows it should be first past the point. Back side, it should be 2 behind the point of who they're reading in a 4-down front. So, it's very efficient for us. And like I said, with COVID and stuff going on, we've actually been installing this week, and we won't get together to install it like Coach Phillips was saying. They're going to get up there, and we're going to go through our variations of it and go through that part of it. But, we kind of tinker with it every week. To me, when I start is if we're running split zone, how much are these guys falling back, and lagging back in their fits? Because, that can kind of jack up your combos sometimes as far as getting off and getting good angles. The big part of it, too, is our tight ends now know, like, if we ever have a walked-up edge blitzer who's technically number 7, they don't have to worry about blocking that guy. Mm-hmm. And then the center knows, too, if something comes down where we're not, whether it's a safety or a corner, we don't have to be responsible for blocking that guy. And that's just the way, like, they don't have to stress about that. They know that we can't block him. They know he's out there, but we don't have to be worrying about necessarily pushing it over to him or doing some different things like that. Our kind of philosophy with it in the run game is we're going to be protected C-gap to C-gap when we're doing those things. And like I said, everything we haven't, knock on wood, haven't had issues with too many guys downfield on the inside zone. But for them, they don't know. They have no idea what's, like I said, going out on the perimeter, which is good because I've been around some of that where guys, like, they use code words, choke or whatever it was to tell the O-line. And I don't think you quite get the movement that you necessarily – because if they're worried about going – if I'm worried about being 5 yards downfield, I can't necessarily be blocking that guy as hard as I want or climb into that backer. So that's part of my teaching with it. And it's been good for them. Like I said, inside zone's what we hang our hat on. It's when probably everyone in the league knows it, but that's, you got to have something you can hang your hat on and believe in, and it's going to be inside zone and our variations with it.
Yeah, I love that idea too. Just thinking back to before we started running RPO of having to, push something to the front side of that all the way out, right? Somebody coming off the edge, whether it's a safety now that has walked down or is a threat there. And I mean, your guys really have to be trained up to have eyes on it. And, you know, we made a living on it, so we would train that up. But it's not the easiest thing to do, especially with younger linemen. And I think that takes a lot of the burden off of them, that they don't have to worry about pushing you know, to a full zone or everybody out to, you know, one gap further or anything like that.
Yeah, and we've tried to put some words in, like where if we know, like in a given week, like if we know the safety is going to be a B gap fitter and we have to block him, we'll work that part of it. Because the deal, like Coach was saying earlier, last year we only worked it really out of our sniffer stuff. Well, the tight end or the O-line doesn't necessarily know if there's a sniffer back there all the time. And so it's hard to tell them all the time, like, hey, in trips, you're going to push it. But if we're in sniffer to the field, we're not going to push it. You know, some of that stuff, like, and it's hard to teach it. So we get a lot of carryover with what we're doing and don't put ourselves in that predicament of making that kid make you right so much of the time. Yeah,
and I think with something you mentioned there, maybe with people who aren't used to doing RPO and thinking about getting into it, what you said about your lineman's approach to it is critical. They can't take on a non-aggressive demeanor in how they're going to block this because they're worried about the ball going down the field. They really have to get off the ball and block their assignments like it's run. Now, you know, how that's done, you know, with this, you know, some teams approach their zone even differently where, you know, it's not necessarily about the combos, but having the combos really starts to time up and take care of level one first before you get to two. And if you're doing that, you should be fine. If that ball is not out, that's really on the quarterback. Something happened, maybe with the ball handling or he hesitated back there. You shouldn't run into those situations very much.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't think on an RPO last year, I'd have to go back and look, but there's not one time that I remember that we got called for too many guys downfield. You know, because like I said, we got to move those folks, and it's been good. And I think the biggest thing is those guys, when we hand that ball off, good things are happening. When we throw it, good things are happening out there. So we get a level of confidence about us. You know, it's kind of like old school, you know, if it's one high, you want to throw the ball. If it's too high, let's keep handing it off. And that really allows us to, like I said, just a confidence level. And Coach Phillips may disagree, but I don't think I said much to a quarterback last year about a hand or a throw, because I try not to be, if they see something out there and we throw that ball, our idea is that it should be explosive. So when that happens, like I've just made a conscious effort not to be, man, we should have handed that one off, because it's, however we get that ball moving down the field, that is, I really don't care as long as that ball's moving down the field and it's effective.
And I think that's one thing with the quarterback is we don't have as many downfield or decisions like that because we place the burden of he's got to make a big, you know, effort, a big movement to tackle the ball carrier before we're going to pull it and throw it. You know, like I said, he knows, the kid knows going into it that he's never going to get fussed at for handing off. One thing that we did, you know, start working towards is instead of, you should have handed it, you should have thrown it, is making sure he can describe what he did. What did number 7 do to make you do what you did? And when we get to that, we actually are using that in terms of coach number 7, just a flat foot and the apex, didn't move, I hand the ball off. He's falling in, making a tackle for 3-4 yards, or he's a hell of a player, whatever we've got going on right there, leads us to the next part of our decision-making of, all right, so now we're getting a free run at the safety. Let's move on to maybe some deep choice stuff or things like that. So using his information, what he's actually seeing, to get to the next thing as well.
Yeah. So thinking about the quarterback, because, you know, he's the link between what's happening up front and what's happening out on the edges right there and in the ultimate decision maker. From that standpoint, you know, where you said you're not really going to get on him about, you know, handing it off, I've seen situations and, work with a quarterback here, last year, especially, I think this year he found a lot more comfort, but early on, he didn't want to throw the ball as much and was probably missing a lot of opportunities. So from that standpoint, what helps, I guess, with the way you guys do it to give that comfort level of being able to make those decisions to pull and throw?
I think you have to show him the actual action that you're expecting to see the ball be thrown, whether it be through camp, through spring, whatever. And it could be me standing out there being the read guy. Me flat-footing or taking read steps doesn't necessarily mean I need to throw it. I need to know if the ball's on the hash and my number 7 is standing on the opposite hash, hand the ball off. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we've taken a lot of time in showing him the looks and the movement. Okay. So, and it may be showing the demeanor of whoever we're playing, that guy, when he's lined up here as he's number 7, his demeanor can show you and give you an idea pre-snap. We spend a lot of time talking about them as opposed to, hand pull. When he takes this action, when he does this alignment, having a level of expectation coming into it.
So taking a look at what you're doing with your receivers, you're going to have sometimes a single guy who's going to have to run the route. Sometimes you'll have 2. They're going to have to communicate what they're doing and be on the same page. And I know we'll get to this one later, but, thinking about future of it, looking at pistol and how you may incorporate the quarterback's ability to decide which side and which defender he'd like to read based on something
Right.
in the front. But looking at the single and the 2 receiver sides in general, what are the things that you're working with these guys to understand, and how do you start training that?
Right. Okay. So it's talking to the single receiver side first. We call that talk. So you're going to talk to the quarterback. We talk a lot about triangles, and we use these triangles in the defense to determine who's fitting, who's going to be the read guy. We talk about one high point triangle, 2 high point triangle, let you know soft corners and hard corners. If the safety is over top of me on the logo of the field, why is he there? He's there so if I run scot-free down the sideline to get over top of me. Well, if that's the case, call my route accordingly. We start with an expectation of we want to run a 5-step glance and every time. All right. So we start with the expectation with him of you're running this route. Okay. Until someone takes you off of it. All right. And which kind of leads us to the first one where we threw a lot of glance, and we would just call it. We would call run play glance. And people knew we were going to do it over and over. All right. So they weren't going to take that safety out of the fit, but they were going to move that corner inside leverage by, 2-3 yards. And we're calling glance. And now we're getting pull reads and throwing glance into terrible leverage. Okay. So we started with it there and saying that you're going to run the glance. Is it hard corner or soft corner? All right. If you have access, but you have bad leverage on the glance, we're going to run a 6-step speed cut out. Okay. And if you don't have access and you don't have good leverage to run the glance, we're going to eat him up and take the top off and be ready for throwing it, however we're winning, on top or back shoulder. The tricky thing, and that's probably the easier one because a lot of times that corner is going to tell you. For us, we define that triangle between the corner, the safety, and the defensive end. Is saying if you ever find that safety higher than 10 to 12 and outside that defensive end, you're going to get a hard corner. All right. If you find him at 10 to 12 or less, what we would call a safety that we would crack, in a push crack situation, the safety we would crack, if he's inside or in or around that defensive end, more likely going to be the fitter. And now I can call, directly off that corner. And just going by defining that access, we talk a lot in terms of the tilt and the depth and the leverage of the corner, knowing where his help is, his awareness and who he's communicating with. We're taking all these factors in, and and again, it's part of it's in our league too. We're not going to see 8 different looks over there to a single receiver side,
right,
and 11 personnel. We're going to see 3, maybe 4, and we're going to practice off those looks and get all 3 called in the game, most likely. Which we still throw a lot of glance. We throw a lot of it. But for the time where that corner jumps inside leverage and it's 3rd and 6 and we've called this RPO, we're not just screwed. We've got some leverage and we've got some flexibility to get out of it. And then if for say we get that cover 2 look right there, where that safety's out of the fit, we have a stock backside where we're just going to run stop routes, and if the quarterback determines that guy, that 7 defender on that side is not a threat, we're going to flip it. He can read on that side. Mm-hmm. All right. Or maybe he's got the access throw to the field and he can still take that as well. But that's really how we work the single. And you're talking 3 throws. Well, technically 4 with the back shoulder, part of that in there as well. So you're talking 4 throws in 1 call. So we're talking about the call sheet earlier and getting overwhelmed. You're just getting to 1 route.
Yeah.
All right. So, or 1 call, I should say. And kind of working through that.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
But that gives us, it gives us some flexibility for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, taking that to the 2 receiver side, a little bit more to read now. You got 2 guys involved, probably more defenders over there. So,
right.
How do you boil that down for them?
We still work in the same principles of we're talking about our triangle. All right. And a good deal of that is kind of ties in with what Coach Wratten said. Is we're working off that point, and whether it be front side or back side, we all have an idea of who number 7 would be. All right. And again, we the majority of the time it's going to be that nickel Sam outside linebacker. We will talk if they start exchanging roles as far as the nickel playing wider to 2 and the safety getting in the fit. One thing we do to help them to really make sure the picture gets clear is we want to get wide. We want to widen our split. And so we will put the number 2 receiver, if the ball's on the left hash, he's going to be on the right logo. Like he's going to get outside the hash and stretch that. So we can make that number 7 defender, the guy who's going to fit the run to the field to be extra hat, make it where he's got to identify himself. All right. So if I'm outside the hash and the nickel, the safety, and the corner are all outside the hash with me, they've made that job for the quarterback pretty easy. It's, hand the ball off and let them try to rally to tackle it. So it identifies number 7 for us, and it gives us, as receivers, it gives us a pretty definitive look of who's who, who's going to be the read, and I just call my route off the other guy. So once we determine who that read is, so let's say for purposes it's the nickel Sam, and he's playing Apex. All right. At that point, when we determine who the read is, that guy doesn't exist to us anymore. All right. We're saying the only reason we're getting the ball thrown to us is this guy's triggered the run, and it's 2-on-2 out here. Mm-hmm. All right. So past that, now we're working back off of our safety. All right. And again, if I'm number 2 to the field and I'm outside the hash, if that field safety most of the time is going to try to stay inside of me. He's not going to widen outside that hash. We've got him out leveraged. All right. So we go same deal. We go with the expectation of we want to throw a bubble. Now we don't necessarily run the bubble and stretch the field because we're already so wide. So we kind of combined that bubble with an out where we're reading that corner. So his first two-step release, he's got to eye the corner. And if he's getting soft, we'll bail out of there. We're showing our numbers to the quarterback. And if he's triggering hard, he's two read, and he sees me as a flat threat right now, we're just going to stop and show numbers, knowing that we're calling the route off the safety because we've already got him out leveraged.
Right.
So that's kind of the process we would go through with it. Now we got to work the communication of it where he's going to make the determination on what route based off that safety. He's going to communicate it both into the quarterback and to the receiver outside of him. All right. So we will call, as long as that safety is inside of us, if we have the read and the safety are both inside of us, we want the ball to go outside. All right. That's pretty, we're 2-on-1 outside of that guy. We've got leverage. All right. When the safety or the read, when one of those guys works higher or outside of us to a point where they're trying to either be the force player or be the guy that's got to get over top of number one and say a cloud look. All right. Once we make that determination that safety or the nickel is going to work over top of one, we want to cross his face. All right. He's given us the leverage or the ability to get in the middle of the field. We want to take it. All right. So that's really how he's going to call. Those are the two main ones that we get in a too high look to that side of the field. Is the safety inside, is the safety outside? Call my route accordingly. Go in, go out based on him. The other looks that we would get, we talked about a lot of times now that nickel is getting out wide to number 2 and the safety's becoming the number 7. He's becoming the fitter and they're exchanging those roles. To us, that's no different. As long as that guy's walking out, we need to go in. He's telling us to go inside. We will give him a little bit different call just to change the depth because number 7 is now coming from higher, right? So we won't necessarily try to have that wrap in slant. We're going to push it vertical a little bit more, knowing that we're going to probably have to take it deeper and that guy's going to trigger a little bit later.
So is that more like a glance for you?
We would push that to 7 steps.
7 step, okay.
Yeah, and again, since he's so wide, it's 7 steps, and you never have the expectation of crossing the hash. So it's kind of like the old bang 8 post and keep it real thin, just so you don't let that guy fall back into it.
Right.
Whereas if it was a cloud corner and that safety's getting over top of 1, we're going to wrap the read, and we're really going to kind of come off at a tempoed pace. And as soon as he triggers, we're wrapping in the sweet spot between the mic and the safety. So that could be 1 step. That could be 5 yards. There's no real depth to it. When he triggers, I trigger to wrap to help us get in the middle a little bit quicker. So as soon as that kid sees it, the ball can come out. I'm looking for it. I guess the only other things that we have out there, we have the 2 in breakers that it's determined on who the number 7 is, if he's a high guy or a low guy. We have that read bubble if it's a quarters or 2 read look. All right, and then if we get rotation to our side, if we get 2 together is what we call it. So if that safety and the nickel, we talk about that 5-yard strike. If they're in the same 5-yard strike and their body demeanor is matching, all right, we're going to treat that as rotation. We don't care if he's rotating to play me a man or rotating to play in zone. For us, it's just rotation. All right. That's where the outside guy is going to kind of get involved now. And we'll get kind of a glance and a will to that. Just, old slant bubble type deal. But we're going to throw it only against that rotation look. So we're getting 2 together, and as part of that process, it's going to let the quarterback know, too, we're calling that route, but we're also going to point that guy, saying, hey, we're calling this because we think he's coming. Mm-hmm. Knowing that the quarterback has that's your number 7, even if he blitzes, like Coach Wratten was talking about, that tight end's not going to work out to the edge and pick him up. He's keeping this spot in the count. So if the quarterback's number 7 becomes a line of scrimmage or a blitz threat, he can send the running back over there to abort and take the run part of it out. And that's built into the communication to it. So, and we didn't talk about it to the single, but the same thing, corner crash, is if this safety's 8 to 10, he's cracked depth, but he's out there in a logo, he's telling us, hey, this guy's coming.
Right.
Call him out. And so we've got that kind of built into it as well. And then the next one is if we get straight man, and
Yeah,
really
so
what
I was
we
gonna
tell
ask
him
you.
is, if we get straight man, we would say if the guy I'm trying to call the route off of, the field safety, the safety on my side, if he lines up pre-snap as a post safety, right, we're going to call slot fade, all right, but we're still going to kind of read it off of this cat that's in front of us. So if the guy's playing me man, the overhang there, I'm going to try to stay outside release to protect the hitch throw as well, and I'm going to feel that. So if I feel him running with me, I'm going to continue slot fade and try to work to the top of the numbers. If I feel him disappear, that contact leaves me in a way where he's not trailing me, but he's buzzing flats, I'm going to start to throttle and kind of sit down right there. So we're trying to keep it where it's slot fade, smash read, but also if we're getting fooled, where it can still be kind of hitch seam as well, and make us right. But that's our go-to for us. If the field safety lines up in the post, not related to number 2, it's going to be man 85% of the time.
Right.
So we work on that assumption of if the guy you're calling your route off of is standing in the post, treat it as man, and that's why we don't really make a distinction between blitz man and rotation. For us, it's just rotation, or it's rotation away. That we would treat rotation away from us the same as we would man.
Got it.
And that's kind of how, and again, it seems like a lot. You're talking, there's a lot of thinking. It's really the 2 basic scenarios of is the safety inside of me or outside of me, if he's relating to me and making it a too high look, or is he rotating to me or away from me? And that's really the 4 things that we talk about to get the corresponding route.
Coach, talk a little bit about practicing this, right? Because right now you guys are in a situation where you are not with the offensive line. You're in your own your group there, keeping guys separate. But I imagine in a normal year, this can work as well. So what kind of efficiency do you create in practice that you're just working these same things over and over and really getting that cumulative effect of the reps over the course of camp, the year, all of it?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing to this whole deal is you have answers to the looks you're most likely to see, right? You may get the crazy one-off, haven't prepared for it look like we all get, all right? But for the most part, you're going to get a cover 2 team. You're going to get a cover 4 team, a team that plays one high, a team that plays man. You're going to get those looks throughout the week. So we feel that if we start with these looks and dealing with these triangles throughout the first day on, we don't add any new routes. So, we don't come up this week and say, all right, we got to run these routes for these looks. And now whatever we have for quarters, day 1, we have, we're playing the bowl game in December, is going to be the same. So the same look produces the same results. So I would say, it's not a magical, we don't have a big time cure-all. Is we're going to put a triangle out there. We're going to go to a 2 receiver side, and we're going to move around. We're going to walk it and talk it, and we'll get in the meeting room and we'll chalk it and film talk it and say, what would you call here? What would you call there? And, why? why is that safety lined up where he's at? What is his purpose? I think that's a big thing is once they understand, like, okay, that safety's at 14 now instead of 10. Why is he doing that, man? And we'll ask that question every day is why is the safety deep? And I, to the point now where I hear in unison to get over top of one. So, I mean, as long as they know that why, now we're just executing. We're throwing routes that anybody can throw. We're throwing slants and bubbles and hitches and things like that. So there's a read on everything is a big thing we've got is we want to show the read, even if it's me and my fat self triggering on the run. We want to have a look where they're calling the routes and a read where the quarterback is seeing what a throw read should be. All right. And we spend more time on those looks as opposed to having crazy routes and we got to add this and that and the other. So we feel like we're getting good at easy routes, where we should increase our efficiency at throwing this bubble or throwing this slant and getting reproducible results as opposed to, coming out with something new that may be great against this one look. And then every time we call it, we don't get the right look.
Yeah.
So that's been our big thing is we bank reps.
Yep.
Whatever we're getting done now, even in split and up here in shorts, just starting, whatever we're getting done now, hopefully, knock on wood, we're playing in February, March, and April, that we're doing the same thing. We're getting the same throws, the same catches. The same kid that's a freshman that just got here is going to be doing those reps again and over. So we hit everybody, you know what I mean? So.
Yep. Coach Wratten, I know a component you've added to this is the pistol, and it doesn't necessarily change things other than adds a little bit more flexibility to the offense. But an overview of how you envision, being able to implement this into the offense and, moving forward, that you could put a guy in the pistol now and based on some of the things the quarterback sees, he can activate him one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is, to call it and talk that, but that allowed us to not be one play behind with the RPO in terms of, hey, we should have called bubble slant here, but we had bubble on. Now I think putting them in the pistol allows us to see which side that the seventh defender's fitting and not say, hey, we should have went to the single receiver side here, but we had the RPO called to the two-man side. So I think that gives us, again, the ability to make sure that seventh defender is not – we're still staying one step ahead instead of saying, man, we should have been over to the single receiver side. I should have called a better play there. Now it's, okay, that guy's in the fit. We need to take advantage of it. We need to take it right now because, with the philosophy that these throws are going to be explosives, you don't want to miss. I mean, we all know we don't want to miss those explosive opportunities. So if we get that, that gives us a great opportunity to hit that on time. And I just looking back on it too, one thing we talked about was some of the other things we're going to do in the offense, the pistol, the backs like being in pistol more. They felt like, the same reasons everyone likes being in pistol. They gave them a chance to be a little bit more patient. They could feel it, stay in there, let us hang a little bit longer. So those things, really help. But I think, again, just as a play caller, it allows you to, not have to check with me. I think when we looked at last year, we didn't check with me as much as in those situations. Now, we'd still look over sometimes, but it took that out of there of, hey, we need to look over, and then they change. And, it takes a little bit of the cat and mouse game out of it where we look like a lot better play callers when those kids are running the right route against the right look.
Right. Well, we talked about the advantages, obviously, in game planning and practice planning. As you get into the game, is there much you do in terms of adjustment, whether that's at halftime or between series, as it relates to your RPO game?
There's not a ton. I would say the biggest thing that happens from the RPO is that it sets up a lot of the drop back passing game in terms of where these guys are. like Coach Phillips talked about earlier, whether it's the deep choice package or whatever we want to go to, because most of what we have, we have some answers for it as far as what they're doing out there coverage-wise. Now, if we totally, we call the wrong thing, obviously that's something that needs to get tweaked between it, between series or at halftime or whatever. But as far as, hey, let's put this route in or whatever, that won't be, the biggest thing too, and we've talked about it, is as we start a game, we got to give those kids a chance to see how they're fitting the run. So we got to do a good job of coming out early and letting those kids, maybe the first drive of the game isn't just the call of their talk. Maybe we just go with our base run rules so they can go out there and see how, they can get confirmation on what they've seen on tape and the scouting report.
Yeah, I like that. So to wrap things up, for coaches out there who might be interested in this and in installing this and maybe going to this variation of doing it in their offense, what recommendations do you have in just getting that started and making sure that they're doing it the right way?
Yeah, I think obviously it's going to be it's a trial and error thing. The big thing is don't overload the routes. If you play in a league where you're going to see, one or two specific deals, it's like maybe you don't need 4, 5, 6 route combinations out there. Maybe you just need 2. Maybe it's bubble and slant. Like, don't worry so much. You build up to the looks you're going to see, as opposed to saying, I've got all these great routes. And just think of it as if it was my 2 versus your 2 or one-on-one, and I could go either way, what would I call? And stop there. Like, you don't need 1,000. You need to handle specific situations. When we started, we had our quarterback would call their routes, thinking quarterback sees all and do that. But like you talked about, the mechanics of getting everything lined up, he's got a lot on him, of identifying who the read is and things like that. So we found that he would come out there and just call whatever, just to get the right call out and get the play started and get going. So don't overload your quarterback. One thing is you're going to come out, and the first time you're going to do it, it's going to look great. And you're going to get some completions, and you're going to have the right routes called. You're like, hell, let's just do it on both sides. And then you get kind of overloaded of, now I'm changing my mesh, and I'm doing this, and where do I look at? And now you get guys that's maybe spinning a little bit or, messing with you some. You overload, all right? The big thing is you're going to like it up first, and then the defense is going to get to their second day install, and you're going to say, oh, gosh, I did too much. Kind of take your time. Let your kids make mistakes with it. Just make sure that they can communicate why they did what. And that's kind of the thing that's helped us the most, is just having a clear path of, our own language. If this guy's number 7, he did this. Now I know what he's talking about. Coach Wratten knows what he's talking about. Our running backs, everybody on staff knows. All right, he said this guy's doing this. This needs to be our next response. Play calling. And again, don't fuss too much about the handoff when you should have been thrown.
Right. Coach Wratten, what's your key piece of advice for coaches out there from your perspective as the offensive line coach and as the offensive coordinator?
The first thing is the offensive line coach is, I think you got to have something where your idea, and whether you're a point team or the quarterback's just aware of who you're working for. We hadn't necessarily been a point team before I was coaching O-line when I was tight ends, and that, that really helped us in terms of now the quarterback goes, he doesn't have to ID anything for us, but he knows, hey, they're working to that guy, so these are the guys that aren't blocked, without making that quarterback and overloading his play and understanding who's blocking who on every single play. And I, like we talked about earlier, I wouldn't let the whole line know that it's that's necessarily an RPO. I let them block and let them run block. That's what they do. And then from the play calling standpoint, we don't try and do it out of every formation. We have a couple that we do it out of, and let us be good, because there's some times where we found in the past where when we're locking the backside, it could really mucky up the read if you got that tight end maybe attached to the front side, and it can cause some confusion. So you got to find what works for you in determining that number 7. And I know everyone out there wants to say, hey, we can do it out of every formation. Well, you probably can, but there's some things that can make it a little bit challenging and mucky up reads, and now you're reading the wrong guy. And so I think that was something that helped us too. We have our situations that we do it, and we found some variations to it, but just find the way that makes sense for you and keeps those rules the same. And if you can't do it out of trips or something, you can't do it, and find a way to package it, because that's essentially what we did. Is we found a way to package these RPOs and make it work for both of us. Like I said, Coach Phillips can go do it in an RPO period, and I can get my stuff in a run concept period, and we're not wasting time on, hey, I need to see that TN slant again. Well, those guys just ran a bunch of yards. They don't need to, so we can kind of work independently, and when it all comes together, it looks pretty good for us.
Yeah, and and kind of go back to simplicity. You're doing it to be right. You know what I mean? So you're calling slant bubble to be right, and be simplistic. So you don't have to really overdo it. If you get to the point where you're overdoing it, you're overthinking it, or you're reaching for the next one, you're probably screwing something up.
Well, guys, I appreciate that advice and really all the information you gave here. I thought a great overview of what you guys do and how you do it, and definitely a lot of thought, I think, for our coaches out there and how they might be able to advance their RPOs here in the upcoming year, whether that is kicking off here in February or in the next fall. But again, thanks for your time. Before we go, just want to make sure our coaches could connect with you. What would be the best way to do that?
I'm pretty good on Twitter. So if you hit me on Twitter, it's I gotta look at it. It's at Alcorn _Coach JP, all capital letters. Or email. We'll respond to that as well.
Same for me on Twitter or email. My Twitter is at Coach Wratten. There's not too many Wrattens in the world, so Twitter is probably my best way.
Coaches, if you would please, for our guys out there who maybe have players, what are your recruiting areas?
Yeah, I do a lot of Mississippi here in state, in the junior colleges, but I am actually going to start branching out a little bit into some North Georgia areas over there. So as soon as they let us back out, I'm looking forward to getting over towards Georgia.
Coach Wratten?
And I recruit Houston, Dallas, and East Texas.
Great. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Best of luck to here. I know you guys are getting going now, so best of luck towards the season. Stay healthy and go out and win some games.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for a rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com, and follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.